Good morning, and welcome to the Johns Hopkins Health Security Exercise, CLADE X. My name is Anita Cicero. I'm Deputy Director at the Center, and I will be your host throughout the day. Welcome to all of you in the audience, and also to those listening on Facebook. Because today is going to be videoed and live streamed, we have a few requests to make of you this morning. One, please no flash photography. Two, please stay in your seat and be quiet as possible throughout the course of the day. We ask you too to hold your applause until I introduce the participants, and then again at the end of the day. We won't be taking questions or comments from the audience this morning, but we really do encourage you to engage on social media throughout the exercise with the hashtag CLADEX. The goal of today is really to illustrate the potential consequences of a pandemic, think about the challenges that would pose, and also to consider some policy solutions that would improve those outcomes. The scenario obviously is fictional, but it is well researched, and we've based it on epidemiologic modeling, public health principles, and an assessment of past outbreaks. All of the assumptions that underpin the exercise have really been carefully researched, but any could reasonably be challenged. We aren't asserting that the specific scenario that we're portraying today is the most likely to occur, but we are asserting that we're simulating an event that is possible. The model and all of the assumptions behind our scenario, as well as the backstory about CLADE X, will all be available on the CLADE X website following the exercise today, and we encourage you to look at that. But during the exercise, we ask you not to focus so much on whether you agree with certain of our assumptions or not, but rather really to look at the big picture of what is going on and think about the policy implications for health security. Health security issues are nonpartisan issues, and this exercise is explicitly nonpartisan. Although it is set in the current time, it's meant to be a generic representation of senior levels of government. The president and the administration, those gathered here, are not meant to represent this current administration or any past administration. The players who will be participating in the event have worked in different administrations and are from both political parties. Other than the National Security Advisor, none of them know how the exercise will unfold, so they'll be learning that along with you. We've asked them to base their participation really purely on their past experience and best judgment. The president in the scenario is offstage and will be interacting with the participants only through the National Security Advisor. So, this is how the day will work. There will be a series of meetings that are convened, and it's an ad hoc working group that the president has asked to advise on the ongoing outbreak. Members of this committee, called the Executive Committee, or XCOM for short, are members of the National Security Council, and then a few additional members that the president thought were necessary, including the Senate Majority Leader and the co-chair of the Congressional Biodefense Caucus. Now, you will see during the course of the day that a lot of information is conveyed to this group over video news clips. And we understand that that's not how the NSC gets its information normally, but it was a convenient way for us to convey information both to the audience as well as to the participants in an efficient manner. The policy challenges to be discussed are high-stakes, controversial issues that require NSC-level attention. So the exercise presumes that the interagency, including DoD, ASPR, CDC, and others, have been meeting up until this point. But now alarming new developments have occurred that really requires the NSC to get involved. Please join me now in welcoming our participants. John Bellinger will play Secretary of State. Jim Talent will play Secretary of Defense. Jamie Gorelick will play Attorney General. Margaret Hamburg will play Secretary of Health and Human Services. Tara O'Toole will play Secretary of Homeland Security. Jeff Smith will play Director of the Central Intelligence Agency. Tom Daschle will play Senate Majority Leader. Representative Susan Brooks will play Co-Chair of the Congressional Biodefense Caucus. Julie Gerberding will play Director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And Tom Inglesby will play the National Security Advisor. So here is the world situation as the exercise starts. It's May 15th, 2018, and this is the first XCOM meeting. The U.S. is still engaged in military operations in Syria and Afghanistan, and we are in the midterm primary election season. An outbreak of a new serious respiratory illness has been recognized in Germany over the past several weeks. And the scenario now starts with the National Security Advisor convening the first meeting of the XCOM.
Thank you all again for coming on short notice. The President needs your advice and judgment. He's called you together here because of your experience and your knowledge and your national leadership. We've got a very serious situation. To start the meeting, I want to begin with showing you the Global News Network clip from this morning.
We are continuing our coverage of a new and deadly infectious disease that broke out in Frankfurt, Germany, and Caracas, Venezuela. 2 days ago, the World Health Organization responded by declaring a public health emergency of international concern, a highly unusual step and an indication of its deep worry. Here are the numbers. In Frankfurt and Caracas, the illness has killed an estimated 50 people. There are 400 confirmed or probable cases, with additional reports of suspected but unconfirmed cases. The illness first appeared in Frankfurt about 4 weeks ago. The patients were initially diagnosed with viral encephalitis, a kind of brain infection. Some also were suffering from pneumonia. The first death occurred within days. In Germany, there have been several clusters of cases within families and at workplaces. At least 4 of the dead were healthcare workers who had treated patients infected with the disease. Based on this, German authorities have concluded that the illness is likely spread to person, probably through inhalation of the virus. Our medical reporter Emily Schmidt is at the CDC in Atlanta with more. Emily, what can you tell us?
Gene, CDC officials tell us that most cases are occurring in healthy adults, but there are some cases in children and the elderly. 3 U.S. Air Force service members at Ramstein Air Base have been diagnosed with the disease. Multiple hospitals are involved in Germany, including the U.S. Army's Landstuhl Regional Medical Center. Patients are being placed in respiratory isolation. Many worried well are showing up at emergency departments and clinics. Public health authorities in Germany have been working to isolate the sick and track those who have been exposed. Now, this disease is characterized by fever, cough, confusion, and in many cases, coma, respiratory failure, and death. Initial tests to identify what was causing the outbreak were all negative, but scientists at the Robert Koch Institute discovered a previously unknown virus in the spinal fluid of several of the patients, a new type of para-influenza virus. Para-influenza is a common respiratory virus. It's unrelated to influenza and typically causes colds in adults and croup in kids. It does not normally cause severe illness in otherwise healthy adults.
Thanks, Emily. Venezuela is reacting very differently. Authorities there are denying there is an outbreak, despite reliable reports from people in Caracas of hospitals being swamped by hundreds of suspected encephalitis cases. There are no details or accurate numbers for us to report. However, Colombian health officials have confirmed that 3 people who fled to Bogota from Caracas for medical care do have the virus. How is the rest of the world responding? Well, Australia, China, and South Africa are restricting travel from Germany and Venezuela. Health officials around the world are screening travelers and investigating possible cases. As of now, there are no reported cases in the U.S. As you can imagine, this outbreak is major international news. Numerous media outlets are in round-the-clock coverage mode. Some are calling the outbreak a flu pandemic, and one network has dubbed it the German flu, although experts emphasize that para-influenza and influenza are unrelated, and there has never been a para-influenza pandemic. Scientists have now given this new strain a name, para-influenza CLADE X. You are going to be hearing a lot more about it in the days, weeks, and possibly months to come.
Okay, so there we are. And with that as the background, I want to invite Eric Toner, Senior Director for Global Health, Security, and Biothreats from the NSC to brief us on what the U.S. government is doing to start.
Good morning, everybody. Here's the timeline of recent events. The first cases of the outbreak seem to have appeared in Frankfurt approximately 4 weeks ago, and in Caracas approximately 2 weeks ago. We can confirm that there are 3 U.S. service members who are ill in Germany. They are all in critical condition. They are the only U.S. citizens that we know of that are infected with this virus at this time. The map summarizes the current information. There are 316 confirmed or probable cases in Germany with 32 deaths. We have limited information from Caracas, but our best estimate is that there are more than 100 cases and 20 deaths. All these numbers are preliminary and will be adjusted as we have more additional information. They may be significant underestimates. Reports indicate that this is a very severe illness in most people and has a high fatality rate. While the first reported case was in Frankfurt, the epidemic's true origin is unknown. Since Frankfurt is a major air hub, the initial assessment is that it spread to Venezuela from Frankfurt. There are also reports of possible cases in London, Tokyo, Taipei, and Kabul. All of these are being investigated. Surveillance is poor in many countries, so we can't be sure that we're aware of all the cases or all the outbreaks. At this point, more than 10% of the diagnosed, confirmed CLADE X cases have died, but we do not know the actual case fatality rate. The virus does appear to be transmissible person to person through the air, and very preliminary assessments from Germany suggest that on average, an infected person infects 2 to 3 other people, which makes it about as contagious as flu or SARS, but much less contagious than, for example, measles. The preliminary information is that the incubation period is approximately 5 to 7 days. At this point, Dr. Amish Adalja from the CDC will brief us on the virus.
The genetic sequence of the virus has been posted online. CLADE X seems unrelated to any of the previously known human parainfluenza virus strains. Within a virus family tree, a group of related organisms is called a clade. Since we don't know how this virus relates to its other family members, it is now widely being called CLADE X. Like the initial cases of SARS and MERS virus, the origin of CLADE X is uncertain. We know that most newly discovered human viruses, what we call emerging infectious diseases, result from animal viruses that jump the species barriers from animals to people. So that would be our initial hypothesis. Germany has shared a sample of the virus with the US, and so NIH and CDC, in collaboration with top US parainfluenza scientists, are analyzing it. There are no known antiviral drugs that seem likely to be helpful for the disease, although thousands of licensed drugs are being screened. There have been human parainfluenza virus vaccines in development for years, but none are licensed. And our initial assessment is that none that are in development are likely to be effective against this strain of the virus, given its genetic distinctions, but we will be examining that. Vaccine research has been initiated by US government and pharma labs, and a number of other countries, including China, India, Brazil, and the EU. The best estimate by leading vaccine producers is that it could take a year or more to develop, test, and manufacture a vaccine for the CLADE X virus.
Thank you, Dr. Adalja. Just to reiterate, this is not influenza, but the CDC does judge this to have pandemic potential because it is a novel virus and it does seem to exhibit efficient human-to-human transmission. The CDC has developed a PCR test for the virus. Currently, it is only available at the CDC and some international laboratories. It will be pushed out to state laboratories in the coming days and weeks. Travel alerts have been issued for both Germany and Venezuela. Alerts have also been issued to hospitals and health departments. Any patient meeting the case definition should be isolated and reported to the CDC. The CDC, in collaboration with Customs and Border Protection, has started issuing health questionnaires and is implementing fever screening at U.S. airports for all passengers on direct flights from Germany and Venezuela.
Thank you, Dr. Toner. So you've heard what the government is doing in response to this. What the president wants to know first is what should our priorities be? You've seen what we're doing. What are we missing? What should we elevate? What should we be focusing on as a government? Secretary of Defense.
It seems like we have a major problem, and I think we have to make a decision here. The president has to make a decision whether we need to publicly treat it that way. I would. And so we have to have secure, regularized lines of communication to the press and the public from the beginning. And I think they need to believe that we're telling them what we know and what we don't know, and that we're going to be consistent about it. I would banish from this table the idea that we're going to be able to keep anything secret anyway, or that we should treat the American people like children. I think we all need to start inventorying what assets we have available in our respective departments. To the extent we haven't already done it, I'm going to do that, including in the Guard, because we're going to need to know what is available, and I'm going to pay some special attention to logistics, supply, lift. I think we need to canvass what legal authorities the president has, and when we ought to invoke them. I'll defer to the Attorney General. And the only other thing from that I heard is, in terms of a priority to CDC, which is 1 year to produce a vaccine for this is too long. And I think the president ought to make clear whatever it takes to shorten that period of time, we need to do.
All right. Any comments?
Why don't I build on that? Let me first say what we've already done. As in past cases, we have set up a task force inside the State Department. We did that when the Ebola event occurred a number of years ago. We put in charge a senior ambassador with experience in this area. We are monitoring what's going on all around the world. I have two concerns. One, of course, is we don't want it to spread to the United States, which it hasn't yet. That's going to be the big concern. We can work with our international partners to take a number of steps. We have not taken those yet, other than issuing a travel advisory and staying in touch with our partners. But there are a number of actions that we could take, but I don't think we don't want to panic at this point. We're going to hear all the normal things about travel bans, but I think at this point we want to monitor and tell the American people that we're monitoring. And last point, we do have several Americans who are critically ill already. My responsibility is going to be to care for Americans outside the United States, and we are monitoring and prepared to help them as necessary. So I just want to tell you, we at the State Department, we are monitoring this very closely. We're in touch with our international partners, but I think we don't want to overreact until we learn more.
Great. Thank you.
I have a question actually for the Secretary of State. What are we doing about Venezuela? I mean, you talk about international partners. What kind of partner are they?
Despite the tensions, Jamie, we do still talk to them on a number of issues, including on health issues. I don't think that we're getting all of the information about what's going on, but we continue to have diplomatic relations with the Venezuelans at a number of levels. We have our embassy there. I mean, this shows the importance of maintaining diplomatic relations with different countries. But it's a problem. We don't know that we're getting all of the information that we should. But the relations have not been cut off.
Secretary Phil?
Well, I think you've already heard a little bit about what's been happening within HHS, but we need to strengthen and extend those efforts. Clearly, alerting the American healthcare system and its providers to the nature of this problem, what to look for in terms of cases, enhancing surveillance so that we can identify as early as possible if there are problems. It's going to be very important to ensure we have appropriate respiratory isolation capacity should patients emerge, and we do have a network for routine care and emergency care, but we need to be working closely with that system. We need to really be canvassing to make sure that we know where our capacities are. I think we want to understand a bit more about this virus as well, this influenza virus, in terms of the nature of the organism. And now that we have a sample, NIH and CDC are going to be working hard to deepen our knowledge, including if it possibly could have been bioengineered. I think that is an important aspect that I'm sure the Secretary of Defense and Secretary of State will be engaged with us closely on, as well as colleagues in the intelligence community. I would like to know whether there's any evidence of animal engagement involvement with this particular outbreak, because we do know, that there are animal variants, and I think there's a lot of concern that this could involve that. And I didn't hear anything about animal cases, but I think that's going to be very, very important. I'd like the CDC to weigh in, of course, but I would imagine we'd be wanting to send some teams, particularly to Venezuela, where the gaps in terms of healthcare capacity are extreme. And I think, we have an opportunity to help them try to better contain spread, but that is time urgent. Germany is a more robust partner, but I think we'd still like to be working with them.
We actually are having problems with that and big decisions to make on that. And if I could ask you to hold that thought for a few minutes, but very important point. We're going to get right back to that on Venezuela. Yeah, Secretary, Homeland Security.
I'd like to reinforce what the Defense Secretary said about being open with the American people. This is a virus we know very little about. We're going to learn a lot along the way. It is an RNA virus, which means it can mutate very quickly, and probably will, particularly if it starts to infect lots and lots of people. So we have to warn the public that we are going to learn as we go, so that they don't think we're idiots that keep changing our mind, because we are going to change our mind. We're going to find things out in the course of the next few weeks that we don't know. And if we do not have the public with us, we're in big trouble. I'd also like to suggest that we not make this a federal government-only effort. We have got to engage the private sector. They need to know what to do with their people. And also, some of our best technical capacity is in the private sector, not to mention the drug companies. But our best scientists, with no disrespect to NIH and CDC, are also in the private sector. And in addition to task force inside the government, we should engage some of these top scientists and drug makers in our deliberations as well, right from the beginning, so we know we have the best device.
Other comments? Senator Daschle and the Attorney General.
Well, let me just build on Secretary Toole's comments. I think this is a time of need for extraordinary leadership. In the era of social media in particular, where truth is just an option, I think it's really critical that our leaders step up to the plate, separate fact from fiction, not be inclined to fall into the hysteria and the hyperbolic rhetoric that oftentimes comes with crises like this. We need calm, we need leadership, we need confidence, we need the ability to communicate with the recognition that there are unknowns out there, but we're going to work in a collaborative way to address those unknowns as quickly as we can. We should have stockpiled, we didn't, but we're going to have to look at that vaccine question to see if we can speed up the delivery of vaccine to something short of 12 months. I think it's really important, in addition to the private sector, that we recognize the critical role of local responders, of first responders at the city and state level as well. There ought to be a coordinated effort to reach out, again, reflecting the need for leadership at all levels to ensure that we have a collaborative response.
Attorney General and then Congressman Brooks.
So let me build on those comments. I think it is absolutely right that we engage with the public, that we make sure that we are being truthful and transparent to the extent possible. But I think if we go out with a set of statements about the problem without having any agenda for the solution, our credibility will be shot. I think back to the Deepwater Horizon in the Gulf, where the president was viewed as observing a problem about to hit our shores without an action plan. So I would very quickly, if we could, Tom, come up with an agenda of action items, and that includes, in particular, addressing the resources and capabilities and inclinations in the states. Because, they have, within the states, any number of powers that we have only with some level of complexity, including with respect to the National Guard. I think Secretary O'Toole's idea about full engagement with the private sector and the research community is very good, but I would come up with an action agenda. This is not a legal question. This is a public policy observation from somebody who's been around for a long time.
And let's be careful not to overpromise. I mean, already the discussion about vaccines is making me a little bit nervous because there have been vaccines in development for many years. Doesn't look like any of those are going to be effective against this. So let's not get the American people thinking that if we just put more money and rolled up our sleeves, we could get them a vaccine tomorrow.
Do you think 12 months is overpromising?
I think we should be very careful about it. I think we should say it's a high priority.
Congressman Brooks, comment.
I really do believe that we need to continue to communicate, first and foremost, what the administration is doing and letting members of Congress, the House and the Senate, communicate and make sure that we know what the administration is doing all across the agencies so that we can communicate all that the administration is doing. I know that there will be incredible concern about the members of our military in Germany and the fact that we have men and women already at Ramstol and who are critically ill. I think the American people will want to know what we are doing specifically for the military. And to the extent that we can have communications tools about what the different steps that are being taken and letting everyone know this is the beginning, there is no vaccine, and do a better job educating the American people about how long it might take. But then we also have to remember for the first responders, make sure that they have the personal protective gear and that they are being educated on how to protect themselves. And so encouraging our leaders in Washington to go home and to be leaders in the community on this with their state and local health officials and first responders.
I'm all for working, I was going to say I'm all for working with states to comment on this, but I would do it from a position of strength. The President has the authority. If he invokes it with the emergency declarations, the Stafford Act, the Defense Production Act. And my concern is, I'd love to know what Senator Daschle thinks, because he knows, is that if these governors think we're asking them and they don't have to do it, once this thing starts to go, everybody's going to want to use their own resources in their own states.
When you say do it, what do you mean?
Well, if we need, for example, a lot of the medical units that that I own, I really don't own because they're in the Guard. And so I'm just concerned if we get a situation where we're asking these governors if it's okay, and this thing starts moving very fast, I think we need to go to them and say, look, we're going to do what we need to do. We want your cooperation. We're going to inform you. We need your help. In other words, this is not something we're imposing on you, but we're doing it from the standpoint of we've set up a chain of command. Your assets are at our command if we need them.
Director Gerber, you've been trying to get in.
Yeah, I think the agreement around the table is that communication is going to be critical, and I would recommend that we set up the Joint Information Center as a government so that we have a coordinating mechanism to keep us harmonized and all in one page. I think the other broad view around the table is that we need to lean in. And that's the hardest communication challenge there is, because you're asking people to prepare and do things, and yet the threat is not imminently here, although I think we need to assume it will soon be here if it's not already. So we're in this very challenging communication domain, and leadership really matters right now. Just to let you know a little bit more about what the CDC is doing, we have, of course, activated our Emergency Operations Center. We have begun the process of communicating with our stakeholders, so we've contacted the scientific media. We've been working behind the scenes with state and local health communicators, and the emergency risk communication systems and networks have been asked to lean in and prepare. We have some pre-stock messages. We're working on a case definition to go along with the diagnostics, because we've got to give people some reliable means for determining if they have a case or they don't have a case. But I think the real priorities in the short run are making sure that we are prepared with advice about personal protective equipment, that we are harmonized across the defense and the homeland security and public health dimensions in terms of force protection, healthcare worker protection, and citizen protection. If we let any air in between what we're recommending for soldiers versus health workers versus citizens, we're creating the opportunity for a very confused and a diminished credibility of our whole effort. Finally, on the point of countermeasures, I think we all understand the importance of not over-promising. I do think, however, that we have some parainfluenza vaccinology under our belts, and we need to get those people corralled and on the case of looking to see if there's any cross-protection, if there's any value in what we have in the freezer, and then asking the pharmaceutical companies to go through their inventory of antivirals and make sure that we don't have any product that would have even some antiviral activity. And then finally, as we've seen with every single new pathogen outbreak that we've contended with, there's always the attempt to use serum from surviving patients as passive immunotherapy. And as you know, Dr. Fauci has recently brought that forward in the New England Journal as a potential option. So we need to at least get those scientists and that energy underway as a potential therapeutic, if not a prophylactic.
And just one add-on, I'm asking the FDA to work closely with CDC on the diagnostic, because we can't just have CDC as the only lab that can be doing that.
Absolutely.
We need to get it available in an emergency use authorization context so that we can have broad continuity of definition.
Secretary Bellinger?
And I'm certain all of us are going to want to hear from the CIA director, because he may know some things that we don't. But just listening to all this, and I am the least expert, as you know, Tom, around the table in these disease issues, and it's good to see everybody, in fact, leaning in and getting ahead of things, because they've seen these before. On the other hand, your job is to advise the president, and I don't want panic being created amongst the American people. This may get worse, but we're talking about military assets, we're talking about vaccines, we're talking about healthcare kits. We need to have the president say we are monitoring. Right now, this is in 2 countries around the world. There are some Americans who are sick. This could spread, but we have seen when a president can create panic amongst the American people about external threats, and we get the American people overly exercised. So again, we're just not there yet. I would urge you to have the president instill a sense of calm, to say we're monitoring this right now. Our departments are doing the things that are necessary.
I would not use the word. I would not make the basic message we're monitoring. If there's as great a danger in terms of public confidence if we are perceived as underestimating this, and then it becomes something that the average person thinks of as an epidemic that threatens their lives. So obviously we need a balance. I'm not talking about going out and, waving it with our hair on fire. But I do think we need to let people know that this is that CDC's issued this in the World Health Organization because this is a major threat to the public health. And we are taking action in addition to monitoring. And I would be careful about the messaging. I think they've got to see us leaning in. Plus which, and again, maybe I'm too sensitive to the Congress, but if the president is seen as not taking vigorous action, they're going to start firing from the Hill yesterday.
I agree with that.
Tom,
Director Smith, did you want to say something? Just to give you a chance.
I do. First of all, as this group knows, after 9/11, the intelligence community made a conscious effort to devote a lot more energy to collecting and analyzing the threat of bioattacks. We may not have spent enough, but we've certainly focused on it. And when this first broke out, I sent a note, a cable to all stations and bases saying, what do we know about this? And thus far, we have no indications that this is anything other than a natural outbreak. But in any public statements the government makes, I think we should say we have no current information that this is anything other than a natural outbreak. As this group has also heard me say, the definition of an intelligence officer is someone who goes into a room, smells the flowers, and looks for the coffin. So part of me is apprehensive about the possibility that this may be man-made, and we know that ISIS and Al-Qaeda worked on efforts to develop a bioweapon. They worked on anthrax, they tried to make sarin and so on, and we've seen attacks by other groups. So as we go forward, we on the intelligence community side will increase our efforts to work with our liaison partners. I want to make sure that we cooperate with all the groups that are set up here, but we need to, at the moment, keep our eyes open and see what else may arise.
Okay, if I could, thank you, Director Smith. If I could direct our attention to another issue that's come up that we need to deal with before we leave today, which is our decisions regarding travel policy and preventing the spread to the United States. And to put that in political context, I want to show you this clip that just came in this morning on the morning news.
Joining us now is Senator Gerald Watson.
Gene, I'm headed to the White House along with 5 of my colleagues, Democrats and Republicans, to demand a temporary but complete ban on all persons traveling from Germany and Venezuela. We can surely prevent CLADE X from crossing the Atlantic. We understand some cases may get through, but it would be foolish to let tens of thousands of airline passengers per week make that trip until we get this terrible outbreak under control.
Dr. Toner, tell us about this decision.